I just get so excited about these micro experiences overall that we could use to teach, educate, and then get something done. Not everything has to be a productivity app. There's a lot of stuff at the very beginning of software development that got done that was super creative that we lost, that I'm excited to get back again.
That's Mario Rodriguez, and he's the head of product at Github. And he believes that Copilot and other AI advances are going to unleash a wave of creativity and enable 1 billion people to be software developers.
And I think it's going to feel a lot more like how kids play to a degree. It's like you create something, you play with it, and you're like, nope. And then you instruct it again, change that specific thing. And then you do it again.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be more like what I call real-time development.
Today on Crafted, we're exploring the power of AI to change the types of apps we build and the way we build them. Plus, Mario has tips on prompting and how to build experiences that delight developers.
Here, you might ask me, hey, why are you telling me that? And you're not going to go and be like, shut up, Mario. So you have to now think about, okay, how do you want to introduce AI in a way that builds trust with the user?
Welcome to Crafted, a show about great products and the people who make them. I'm Dan Blumberg. I'm a product and growth leader, and on Crafted, I'm here to bring you stories of founders, makers, and innovators that reveal how they build game-changing products and how you can too. Crafted is brought to you in partnership with Docker, which helps developers build, share, run, and verify applications anywhere without environment confirmation or management. More than 20 million developers worldwide use Docker's suite of development tools, services, and automations to accelerate the delivery of secure applications. Learn more at docker.com. And Crafted is produced by Modern Product Minds, where my team and I can help you take a new product from 0 to 1 and beyond. We specialize in early-stage product discovery, growth, and experimentation. Learn more and sign up for the Crafted newsletter at modernproductminds.com. What are you most excited about right now?
Wow. AI is changing so fast that probably you ask me that again next week, and maybe I have a different answer. So maybe let's try like an evergreen answer to that question, in my opinion. It's the ability to democratize software development. Today, a lot of software is being written by professional developers. And we have been talking at GitHub about what if we could actually have 1 billion developers in the world? How much potential can we unlock overall? So I think the pursuit of that and all of the changes that will need to happen in order to get there is really what gets me out of bed every day. Imagine by 2030, we're 10 billion, right? 10% of that would be 1 billion people doing some type of software. At that moment, though, you're going to have to redefine then what a software developer is, because it's not only those professional people. Now it's going to be my daughter who is 9 years old, or, I have 2 daughters, one 9 and one 7, or even the 7-year-old one. Yeah. It could be my mom, as an example. It could be, someone in high school that really has a specific need on something and wants to actually develop something really quick. Jonathan Carter, he's the head of Next at GitHub, and I think he says this a lot more eloquent than I am, but I think a lot of the applications are going to go back into this very simple root. And if you think about Unix and the Unix commands and how you could compose them, but they're extremely simple. They do one thing and one thing very well. So if you think about these applications becoming these micro apps, and then us returning to this era where a lot of these micro apps are very simple, they're composable, and then you could actually even tweak them to what exactly you want out of them. And I think that future is really interesting as well. I have a story even that happened 2 days ago that I could tell you that is a good reference point. So like I said, I have 2 daughters, and I have noticed with them, at least at the age that they are right now, is that they love to learn, but they love to learn through play. Like if I actually go and sit down with them with a notebook and I make them do some type of math or anything like that, then becomes, yes, they do it, but it's not something
Dad.
that, exactly, it's not going like that overall. And, I wanted to teach the oldest one a little bit more about probability and chances, and to a degree, transparency, luck. And I was like, well, maybe we should just play a little bit of poker. And I wanted to just create like this little micro app that every time we will have a hand, you could think about with today's model. And all my daughter has to do is kind of point the camera to that, take a picture on it, and then ask a question, be like, okay, what's the probability of this hand winning or not? And then she could figure it out if she wants to bet, the fake money or not. Yeah. But that is not a professional app that someone is going to have out there. Maybe it does exist for the people that actually do tournaments and things like that, but not actually made for a 9-year-old. Let me just tell you that.
Yeah, well, also the point of, I think, you doing it with her was for her to build it and understand the lesson while building it. It's not to use an app that someone's already made of how to play poker.
Exactly. So that's what I think the future is. Like, hey, you're just having a moment. You need something ephemeral. And I just get so excited about these micro experiences that we could use to teach, educate. Not everything has to be a productivity app. And I think there's a lot of stuff at the very beginning of software development that got done that was super creative that we lost a little bit over the last 50 years that I'm excited to get it back again.
That's very cool. I'll tell you, it's funny you brought up poker and probability. The very first app that I ever built, and I am not a software programmer, and this story will emphasize that, but on my TI-83 calculator in
there you go.
10th
I remember
grade,
those.
Yeah, I thought you might. I learned, that there's a random number generator in there, and I think I was learning statistics or something. We've been taught by our teacher how to program the quadratic formula into the thing. But I was like, I think I could build blackjack. And so I built blackjack into it. And the part about me being a terrible programmer is I could never figure out how to make an ace, a 1, or an 11. So my game was terrible for that reason. But like it worked unless you got an ace. I hadn't thought of that in a long time. So
exactly. So that brings some memories. So, and you probably had fun when you were trying to program that, and eventually you hit that bug. If you had Copilot, then it will probably assist you. And we should actually try that and try to see if Copilot can understand how to program a TI-86 or a 90-something or whatever the latest one at the moment was.
Paint a picture for us of what software development may look like in the future. I mean, right now, it is largely in a text editor. It's largely writing things in sort of a linear fashion.
Yes.
But I don't think that's the right thing to picture in the future.
Correct. And this is why I'm so excited about it. Is we, I think, have at this moment, for the first time, a medium where we could actually challenge what the status quo is. Not again for professional programmers or anything like that, but just to unlock this 1 billion. And there's I think 2 things that are really intriguing for me. One of them is for us at least at GitHub is the human is always at the center. So you always have to keep that in mind. One thing that humans have that I struggle thinking AI systems will have is this concept of creativity. Like we could literally create something that did not exist before. And so like if you put the human at the center, the reason why I mentioned that, and I think it's important, is you put the human at the center and you allow that creativity to shine, then you could get a lot of things done that, in my opinion, advances, humanity. And one of the key changes I think that are going to happen is, like natural language is going to take center stage because it's just like part of humanity. And it has a lot of things, a lot of meaning that is so hard for us sometimes to actually put in some machine format overall. The second thing that I think also it's going to happen that doesn't happen today is that you should be able to create a program then on your phone. Look, we're very privileged to have computers, and in some countries in the world that do not have the technology that we have, but they all have phones, right? So you could imagine that a kid, a person in high school, even a person in a university will have a phone that now through natural language they could actually express the intent that they want out of that software and get that back. And then the third thing that I think is going to start changing dramatically is how we experience this loop of creating this application. So for the professionals, they're going to have this AI native editor of getting that loop. For the non-professionals, I think there's going to be a lot of innovation on how you're going to go through that loop. And I think it's going to feel a lot more like how kids play to a degree. It's like you create something, you play with it, and you're like, nope. And then you instruct it again, change that specific thing. And then you do it again.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be more like what I call real-time development. And then it's going to have two worlds, one for that professional and then one for these people that are just creating something for them that they needed to get something done, either for fun or for work or for education.
I love that future because what you're talking about is increasing the iteration speed, which you're the head of product, and like the quicker you iterate, the better the product is. And you're talking about like this rapid feedback that's going to be even more possible with these new tools.
100%.
I'd love to hear how you see the craft of product management and the way that we build, test, measure new products changing with the rise of AI.
I don't think this is a hot take, but maybe it is not an opinion expressed or shared by many. But I think doing AI products is incredibly hard and completely different than doing features that did not have AI, as an example. So look, I've been doing product for 20 plus years, and traditionally, and whatever it fails at is considered a bug. AI is completely different. If you were to think, even if in the lab or in your offline evaluation, you might get 90% right. And like getting 90%, it's like you're doing something good into like you're really like exercising the right test in offline evaluation. You're not lying to yourself, et cetera, et cetera. That means at the end, that 10% of the time that your user tries that, it's not going to actually get that same answer back. Or it didn't do what it was supposed to do, and they're going to be disappointed about it. And, because they're so
or it gives them dangerous information. I mean, you can go even darker than that.
So you got to be so careful, and you got to be so mindful. You gotta really understand quality. What does quality really mean? Like you have to pay attention to all of these things, and applied science people and their people actually do an amazing job on that as well. But you have to really, from a product perspective, think how to protect against that non-determinism. And look, even me to my team, like I was testing a feature the other day, and I asked it a question. The first, responded back beautifully. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask it 5 times and see what happens. And the 5th answer that it gave me was not only completely wrong, I thought it was like, wow, like we need to figure out how to actually protect, not from an like responsible AI perspective, but mainly from a trust of the customer perspective against that. And there's ways that you could do it. Like people could say also whatever they want about prompt engineering, but if you know how to do prompts very, very well, I will hire you tomorrow. Like for us, prompt engineering is a real thing. And you could actually create these prompts to protect you from that non-determinism from the AI and actually create a better user experience for the customer. So the first thing is, in my opinion, like, hey, before we knew how it could behave, now you had to really think about, well, these edge cases where you're not going to get, where it's going to, like say something that is not really true, how are you going to protect against that so you could still have customer trust? And then I'll tell you another one that is, we started to talk more and more about in the team. And it has to do more about psychology, in my opinion. But I'll give you a real life example. Like pull requests, and a pull request is or a code review. A pull request is actually an artifact in Github that you make in order to actually get your code reviewed by other people. And in this code review process, multiple humans that are in a team participate. And imagine you did the pull request, and I'm reviewing your code, Dan, and you have this beautiful code of blackjack. And I could give you subjective feedback. And you, for the most part, if we're in a team and that subjective feedback is respectful and all of those things, you are going to be like, oh, Mario, that's okay. This is why I did it this way. I'm not going to take part of that feedback, but this is the other thing that I'm thinking on it. And you're probably not going to flip a table and stop talking to me, right? Like you're going to come back and you're going to take that subjective feedback as part of like, this is how we work as humans. It's like, okay, I put something in there. Guess what we have been seeing? When Copilot gives extremely subjective feedback, us humans really do not want Copilot to ever give us feedback again, as an example.
Yeah.
We're like, nope, you're completely wrong. It is completely subjective. I know what I'm doing. You're a machine. You don't know what you're saying. I am not going to ask you to ever review my code again.
Yeah.
Like, we literally
Yeah.
see that psychology at times play out.
Yeah, I have the same reaction when I'm driving and Google Maps tells me something that I know is stupid. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to turn here so I can save 17 seconds and make 17 more turns. I'll just stay on the highway, thank you.
Correct.
So I have that same visceral, like, shut up reaction.
Yeah, and maybe if we are next to each other and I tell, turn here, you might ask me, hey, why are you telling me that? And you're not gonna go and be like, shut up, Mario. So, but that's reality. What you just said right now, it's reality. So you have to now, from a product perspective, think about, okay, how do you want to introduce AI in a way that builds trust with the user? I think human psychology is going to play a significant bigger role in the life of product managers going forward as we utilize more or as we infuse AI into more and more of the applications that we use every day for this to be successful.
Yeah. Give a few more practical tips on how you test a product that is using AI at its core. You talked about you got this prompt and you did it once and it was great, and you did it 4 more times and the 5th one was terrible. So that's like one specific thing that people can do is like, don't just trust the prompt the first time because it is by definition non-deterministic. You will not get the same answer every time. Like what are a few other ways that you can build successfully with AI?
So we strongly believe that, in fact, we have this internal product that we named. It's not very clever. It's called Copilot Offline Evaluation, but the abbreviation is actually pretty cool. It's COFFEE, like COFFE. And so we utilize COFFEE a lot, is what I want to say by that. So what we try to do with COFFEE is to figure out really what are the tests that we should be having, and what are the responses? And like a human has to be part of that too. Later, after you get the human, like the right test cases, you could actually use synthetic tests, and you probably have heard that in your podcast or in other ones too, which is like, hey, we're gonna go and create all these synthetics, and then we're gonna actually even have the AI rate itself on the answers that it gives. What we sometimes do too is like, we ask this model a question, and we could ask this other model to be the rater on that. And we then are very careful about what are the tests that we want to run and being true to that. So you do want to try a significant amount of variation on those tests to get better and better signal that your what I call your system prompt together with the other prompts that kind of had more context into what you're feeding for inference, ends up behaving the way you want it. So what I would say is like, if you're doing product and you're doing an AI product, please over-invest in offline evaluation. If not, I think you're going to pay it at the end. So that's kind of like number one. Number two, we have this concept of staff shipping, and where we just give it to all of the GitHub developers or all the GitHub staff, and then you have people play with it, and then that's your second thing where you're like, okay, we have some offline evaluation. Now let's see what actually happens in the real world, but with some friends, right? I think you need that human loop evaluation too, and then the third thing that we do, and this is the most. I think there's a lot more innovation that needs to happen in the market on this one, by the way, but it's online evaluation, and then paying attention to online evaluation at the end to be able to make the right decisions. So we were working on this thing where we wanted to increase the acceptance rate of Copilot, and we also wanted to make sure that the latency of getting that suggestion by Copilot is small overall. Because we think like you don't want to be waiting too long to get something suggested while you don't want to disturb your flow. It's really the main thing. We put it over there in the real world, and we started to see that even though we were actually given faster suggestions, the acceptance rate was decreasing. Even though, like, even on offline, like, we did some things to better even the quality of those results. And we're like, how is this possible? And And we started digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And what we saw was that, hey, we had regressed the ability for Copilot to give multi-line suggestions. And because we had regressed the ability, because it's faster, it was just giving you less and less. But guess what? The developers love multi-line suggestions because it would save them a lot more time. For them, it was a lot more. So we saw NSAT go down. We saw acceptance rates on certain things increase, but on these other things of lines of code acceptance rates, we saw it decrease significantly. Yeah. So we were like, what is happening? So there's this trick now, yes, they want it fast, and yes, they want high quality, but if it's just 3 lines, they just don't like that. They want to actually add a value as well. So I think that's a place where, look, we're still learning as a company, and I think there's a lot more innovation out there that we need to do. And when I say we in this case, I mean the entire industry on online evaluation on how to actually tease apart things a little bit better there to be able to create the great product, because it's a really hard problem at times.
Yeah. The other thing in that story just now is it's an example of you get what you measure, right? So if you had a team and their whole objective was make acceptance of code suggestions go up, the prompts or the responses would have just gotten shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, and developers would have been less happy, but it would have been 99% acceptance.
Yep, correct, right? Exactly. So, you get what you meant. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And by the way, this is true about all of us. If you have a metric you want to move, humans, because of their creativity, they could get very good about moving that metric. So be multi-metric in the way that you evaluate your AI products. You cannot just rely on 1 or 2. I think you need to rely on 3, 4, sometimes even as high as 5, in my opinion. I've seen that. 5 gets a little bit problematic at times, but I would say if you're only using 1, you're failing. But you want to be probably 2 or 3, and maybe as high as 5.
Well, this kind of gets to product being, I've heard you say this before, more art than science. If you've got, machines are really great at optimizing for one and only one objective. Once you have more than one, you can set up, guardrails, different things. But you're basically saying there's for lack of a better word, product sense, and that you have to apply here to get this right.
Yes, and look, the name of the podcast, Crafted, right? It's craft becomes really, really, really important overall. And as part of that craft, I think you need to have product sense, and that product sense comes from experience, definitely a set of things that you have in your DNA that give it to you too, but also appreciating that we are now not necessarily just in the technology field, you really are in that intersection, between science and art, for sure.
Yeah. Are there 1 or 2 things that you've noticed about, for developers, let's say developers who are using, let's say, Copilot, for them to get the responses that they want? Are there a few patterns you've observed of ways to prompt it to get great responses without, having to ask it 5 different ways?
Yes, the less ambiguous you are in that prompt, the better it is. So in my opinion, if you use shorter sentences and you're more directive, in my opinion, you get a better answer. If you try to tell a story to, Copilot, sometimes you're not going to get the answer that you get back. But if you're very much you try to get the ambiguity out, then you're going to get significantly better answers overall. So I even have seen people hack Copilot, and not hack it in the way that you would think, but on the sense of they go in, they copy and paste this thing, and they put it as comments at the top of the file, just so it has all of that context. Because right now what Copilot does is, on the open file, it tries to actually see what is before the code completion and also what is after the code completion. And then we do a couple of other magic things. But we kind of go and use that and pass it to the model in order to generate the right code suggestion. So it's not, and we do adjacent files and a couple of other things too. But think about it that way. So sometimes if it's not in the adjacent files and they know the context, they copy and paste it into this file. So Copilot has all the context before, and then they just go and say through a comment, oh, do this thing. And Copilot does an amazing job. And then they go back and delete all that context from the file because it really was to give it to Copilot. They were still in the early days of what should be an AI native experience, because that's kind of not ideal for me to copy a bunch of things for Copilot to do a better thing. And, the more descriptive you are, the more time it takes. And if you're only going to get 5 lines of code suggestion, you don't want to spend that time either. So I think there's a lot more innovation that will happen in here. But be direct, even say please. I have seen that work as well. Yeah. And, use shorter sentences on exactly where you want and be descriptive in the places that you want to be descriptive.
Can you share a bit about the development of Copilot and some of the things that you tried that didn't work along the way and how you landed on today's experience?
Yes. So, look, I was in the first founding team of Copilot. I do know there was a paper that was called an automated per programmer fact or fiction. I think it was done around August 30, end of August of 2020. This was before ChatGPT, by the way. The model that they were using was called Codex by OpenAI. And this paper was by Uga, Alex, and Albert. And the paper made the rounds clearly, to a select set of leaders at Github. But that was kind of like the first time that I think Brian Lovin and a couple of other people maybe did a video to kind of, so you could see kind of the power of it as well. And that was the first time, in my opinion, that I saw what this could be in the way that that paper was structured. Was saying, look, we tried to give Codex all of these questions. Like there were a set of engineers that ended up doing programming questions or problems, and then they gave it to Codex and said, "Go solve this." And Codex was able to do an extremely good job at that. And then the other thing that they did, which I think was that's what blew me away at times, was they had this function. There was comments on that function, and then there were tests on that function. And then essentially what they did is have Copilot be able to then have to recreate the function just based on the comments and then see if it passed the test and then try to figure out how to actually then change what the function was to then pass the test. It never saw the function. It only saw the comments before. And the reason why I'm telling you that was the thing that changed my mind completely. Yes, there were before ways for you to evaluate ML models on things like that. Like, hey, I'm going to give you a problem to solve. Go and see how many shots it takes you to solve it. But a lot of these things never actually took natural language and try to recreate the function, in my opinion. And just by reading the comments and the function name and kind of what the arguments were, this thing was able to try to recreate it and then eventually write enough to pass it. That synthesis was it was amazing. I think Alex had the first commit on that repo, that synthesized repo overall. And I think that was beautiful. So that was the beginning of it. That's when you could actually see we have a technology that we haven't seen ever before. But then, like anything, you have a tech. How are you going to get that into a product? That's a really hard thing to do as well. Many good techs have died because they never made it to a product. And so the team started exploring various things. And I was speaking to Idan on this. And one of the things that that team tried is, it's not what you see today, by the way. That happened later. What it was is you will go into the editor and you had this thing that you invoke, and it's a model window, and you say generate. And you would ask it to generate, and then it would do something. And you could expect how we gave this to internal developers, and they hated it. They could see the power, but they're like, I don't know how to use this. Cool, cool tech. Hey, this is cool tech. But that's not how I develop. I don't pause all of a sudden and be like, modal window generate. So they started iterating until they got to, IntelliSense had already existed for a long time. In IntelliSense, you maybe do that, and then you wait for a millisecond or two or 50 milliseconds, and then you get something back, and you could accept it by just hitting tab, as an example. And we were like, oh my God, what happened if we could get the latency of Copilot to be that good? And then you just type in, And if you don't like what Copilot is telling you, and by the way, we see this also in many of the word processors too, like sometimes, or email products, you're typing something and it gives you something in this gray text. And you're like, oh, whatever, like I don't want that. You could keep typing. And then sometimes you're like, no, that's exactly what I wanted you to say. You just saved me 10 or 5 strokes on this. So on that end, like we started getting to that latency until they got that ghost text to do, to be fast enough and to actually have the right quality. And that is how Copilot began overall.
That's cool. And I love also that it's, the behavior of hitting tab that's a user experience insight. But the real work is the latency had to be low enough that actually would work in the first place.
That will work, exactly.
Yeah. I love that. So you spend a lot of your time thinking about developer happiness, developer productivity. How do you measure these things?
It's a very interesting question because I think it's, again, art and subjective.
Totally.
For us, what developer happiness means at the end is, hey, are we keeping that developer in the flow? And that flow it's not only while programming. Like if you think about software development, you spend a significant amount of time also doing sense making. So you have to look at the code and figure it out and say, okay, we want to accomplish this. And your brain needs to go and say, you know what? That means you're going to have to edit this file and then this other file too and this other file too.
Yep.
Maybe we don't have, we need to bring in this dependency. Oh, that means that we're going to touch this code and this other code is actually calling us. And then after I make all of that sense, you might touch only one line of code. By the way, you might just go to one place and say, you know what? This is the way we're going to do it. Boom. And so you have to give them tools for that. Copilot allows you to actually explain files. It needs to grow in actually making you sense make about the entirety of the application. That's a really hard problem to do today, by the way. Then you need to actually keep them in the flow while programming. We do a pretty darn good job about that today. Then you have to keep them in the flow at build time and at test time as well. And then you try to abstract, in my opinion, as much as you can away, platform engineering is a hot topic because of that, from like the deploy and all of the automation there is and then deploy. And if you do those things, your productivity as a developer goes through the roof, your happiness as a developer goes through the roof. And guess what? Probably those things happen. The company and what they're doing, unless they're spending a lot of time on politics or on dependencies, their outcomes for that business also goes through the roof. So what we ask them to actually try to measure is how much time are you spending on sense making? How much time are you spending developing? How much time are you spending actually waiting for builds or waiting for compute overall? So like builds to pass, checks to pass, all of those things. How much time are you spending in deployments? And then how much time are you spending in meetings and waiting for other humans? And like those things, if you end up optimizing them and having Copilot help you in many of them, then you're going to get the outcome that you want as a developer happiness and then also as a business metric for the user.
I love this. And I love how passionate you are about this. How did you come to this passion about making engineers happy?
That's a good question, but maybe it goes back. So look, so I was born in Cuba. In Mom and Dad are educators, and we got to the United States. I didn't speak the language to start, so that was a little bit tough when you are in high school and you don't speak the language.
Wow.
High school people are not very kind at times on that end. So, but Dad had this, ended up founding an electrical company, and I went to school. I was supposed to kind of take that business over, right? And I went to school mainly for electrical engineering. I was trying to do a computer engineer and electrical engineer at the same time at the University of Miami. But my passion really was like circuit design and RF frequencies, radio frequencies, and try to see at that moment wireless was not what it is today. And I ended up taking an internship at Lucent Technologies. And during that internship, I was supposed to be doing Lucent Technology had this, I guess they were servers, but they're racks at the bottom of the cell phone tower. And I remember they had this stack that was beautiful, that if you're on the highway on a cell phone, you could go from tower to tower and they did not drop the call. Mm-hmm. An incredible feat what they were doing in those towers to do that, because at that moment, and I was trying to design a circuit that will go into one of those servers or those racks in that cell phone tower overall. And they're like, okay, Mario, go and do it. And I started doing it. And they're like, well, write some tests. They had me program in Perl. Please, you don't have to learn Perl. But like I ended up programming 10,000 lines of code. And in that internship, it was like 10 weeks, 12 weeks. And I was like, what am I doing in my life? Like I stress about heat dissipation, about all these advancements that need to come into hardware. If you're a hardware engineer, you know what I'm talking about. It's a hard life to do that the right way and to do innovation in that space. But in software, you just type. And that's it. Like there's this computer that does this thing. And I'm like, I'm in the wrong career. So I went back and told Dad, I'm not going to take over your business. I'm going to just go back into software. And I'm going to try to spend my time try to make software development amazing, I think, because it's just it just captivated me, transparency. Then the education part of it, the reason why I like making tools for software developers too is like there's a lot of education that goes into there too. And my family has always been big on that. So I probably got the bug from both of those aspects.
Tell me more about where your love of learning and teaching came from. I know that your family was a big influence for you there.
My dad was a physics professor. Mom was a university professor. Then my dad eventually then went into electrical engineering, and then after that, he became an engineer as well. But I think he was one of the youngest professors of physics in his university back in Cuba. So I remember when I was 9 years old, Mom will come in and give me all of these papers to grade because she wanted help in grading them. So she gave me a red marker and it's like, okay, go and figure it out if anyone had any misspellings or things like that, and I would do that. And then Dad sometimes would also give me things that are very similar but from a different angle. So even so much right now that I helped found a school here in North Carolina. It's small in the rural parts. It's not in the city. So it's probably an hour and a half from where I live. And just to try to figure out how can we actually increase the test scores of the students that do not live in the city and that maybe don't have access to the same teachers or don't have access to the same resources that people that are in big cities have. And you want everyone with an amazing education, and you want to innovate in giving them that amazing education.
Yeah, you're saying this so almost casually, like, oh, I launched a school. I talked to a lot of founders on the show. I have not talked to someone who's founded a school. Like, could you tell us what was it that caused you to found a school?
I think we all agree that humanity can benefit from better education anywhere in the world, right? And since we have a privilege sometimes in these big cities, that privilege doesn't exist at times in the more rural areas of this country and many other countries as well. Yeah. So making sure that everyone has access to amazing education, I think it's part of who I am, and also what I think it's what we should all be doing is try to figure out how to provide better and better education to all humans. And look, education is hard. It's not easy. There's many ways. Kids learn at different rates. Like, I think humanity knows how to do agriculture very, very well. We figured that thing out, like, to a nth degree. We do not know how to educate kids. Many places actually are just babysitting your kids, in my opinion. And I love that a lot of companies and a lot of institutions now are making their stuff available for free online, because then that allows these students, by the way, so we give them one laptop to each one of those childs. But what that allows us to do is, let's say we have one child that really gets physics very well, and he wants to just advance, and we don't have that teacher available at that moment. Then that student can just go ahead. And if you let that space happen, which is what I do, it's like, hey, that kid is advanced, let the space so they could just go to a computer and learn more about physics, and that's okay. Then the teacher is mainly facilitating sometimes that. Yeah. Then you get a better education at the end. I think we just are not innovating enough into how to try different things to increase the reading level, the proficiency level in math, even things like programming and what software development is in many of these schools.
And as we think about, all the things we've just talked about AI in the future, there's many, many other things that are changing. What are some of the skills that you hope these kids, that your kids are learning today, that you think are going to be really essential going forward?
Systems thinking is so one of the things that I been thinking more about is like, okay, how do you teach system thinking? It's a hard thing to do, I think, because you have to, in system thinking, you have to look at the world extremely analytical from one side and like actually try to put some things together that are not intuitive at times, right? But I think system thinking is one of the things that is good, because in system thinking, then you could start expressing these things in natural language, and then you could express then the outcomes that you want depending on these inputs, and then you could let software be the middle glue of those things. So I think in the future, system thinking is going to be really powerful overall. Some people will tell you too, like, thinking through first principles would actually accomplish the same thing. Well, thinking through first principles, easier said than done the majority of the time as humans, in my opinion. Psychology is another one. We don't teach psychology or really some of these other softer skills in both education, in both, I would say middle school, high school, or university, in my opinion, and how to then end up designing and interacting with software and AI. Well, I mean, clearly math and anything that has to do with software is always something that we deeply encourage. In a specific on that, I was in Uruguay and I was really impressed. We were also there visiting some kids. We enabled 126 kids to be able to do their first Git command, understand what Copilot is. And they were teaching them loops. I think like teaching that from a very early age, I think is really powerful. And we probably need more innovation and try to see if that creates what we want at the end or not in the kid. But meaning like the teaching itself actually allows them to understand things a little bit better when it comes to programming. Those type of things, which is like, hey, teach things that are first principle, and then from there you could understand a lot more. Like I was taught that F is equal to MA. Like if you really understand F is equal to MA, you understand a lot of physics and you can solve a lot of equations. Yeah. And I don't think the education system that I went through really encouraged me to look at things from like the base of it, from the foundation and from the first principles. And that's what I think we need to continue to do for these kids and for the next set of programmers in the world too.
Amazing. Mario, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
That's Mario Rodriguez. I'm Dan Blumberg, and this is Crafted. Crafted is brought to you in partnership with Docker, which helps developers build, share, run, and verify applications anywhere without environment confirmation or management. More than 20 million developers worldwide use Docker's suite of development tools, services, and automations to accelerate the delivery of secure applications. Learn more at docker.com. Special thanks to Artium, where I launched Crafted to see how Artium can help you build your future at artium.ai. And Crafted is produced by Modern Product Minds, where my team and I can help you take a new product from 0 to 1 and beyond. We specialize in early-stage product discovery, growth, and experimentation. Learn more and sign up for the Crafted newsletter at modernproductminds.com. Please share Crafted with a friend or have your Copilot do it for you and see what your friends say.
Nope, you're completely wrong. It is completely subjective. I know what I'm doing. You're a machine.